Welcome back to the Builders Coach Show. I'm your host, I'm Jess, and I'm here with Kurt today. How are you, Kurt?
I'm great, thanks, Jess. How are you doing?
Yes, I'm good. Look, I'm really excited about this episode because, as you know, I love numbers. And what I thought we'd do today is just go through the 5 main metric that any builder needs to know and track.
Yeah, love it. Before we get into it, like numbers are so important for any business, but great to see you sporting your Builders Coach shirt.
Oh, yeah, thanks. I'm wearing my Builders Coach polo shirt. It's actually the one we got made last year to go to the International Builders Show in Vegas. You remember about that?
Vegas, baby. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, it was pretty good. And we're missing it this year, unfortunately. But
yeah, we're not there. But
yes.
we've got some people we know that are there.
Yeah.
So we'll get the inside scoop when they get back.
Definitely. We'll be there next year, maybe.
Looks good on you, by the way.
Thanks. Okay, back to the numbers.
Yes.
So top 5 key numbers that any builder needs to know and
Is that what
track.
we're going to cover today? The top 5 numbers any builder needs to know. Okay, cool.
Yeah, you in for it? So first question, what would be your number 1 number metric?
Easy question. Hands down, net profit. All right. Okay. It doesn't matter how much revenue you generate. And we were talking about just before how some builders chase the revenue, not the margin. And there is gross margin and net profit margin, which we'll get into, right? We don't want to get in the weeds just yet. But ultimately, you're either making a net profit or you're not. Yeah. And, it's quite simply, you're generating revenue, and then with that revenue, you need to pay your bills, right? You need to pay your subcontractors, your overheads, all the materials, and very importantly, yourself. And then with what's left, that's your net profit. Okay. And there's a net profit number, which will be like a dollar number. Most guys that come to us these days, the residential builders who are mainly custom homes and remodelers or guys doing renovations, they want to get into that 7-figure club. So net $1 million, all right, after all expenses, including wages to self. Very importantly, because a high percentage of guys that come to us, when I look at their profit and loss, and we do it on day one, because your financials are your scoreboard for the business. So we need to see, what do the numbers look like? And then make decisions, off the back of those. So most guys don't have a wage allocated to themselves in their profit and loss, all right? So if they're on site, that wage should not be in their overheads. It should be in cost of sales, and I think we'll get to that a little later on. Yeah. But most guys don't pay themselves, and sadly, a lot of builders out there, their employees are earning more than them, which is quite sad. But again, it doesn't matter if you're turning over 100 mil, 20 mil. If you're not making a net profit, then, what are you doing? Okay.
Yeah, let's unpack that because there's quite a few things you said in there. Mm-hmm. So a lot of builders are chasing revenue, but what you're saying is that net profit margin is really what matters. So why is that? And then let's dig through what is that number, and also what is a healthy margin?
Okay, there's any number of reasons why someone's chasing revenue, and it's more, I think, it's chasing cash flow. All right, so people need money coming in. There's not enough money to pay the bills, and it's you would think it's simple. Like surely you can track money in and money out, right? And look at what's left, if any. But it's not. There's more complexity, and we'll get into the specific numbers that help give builders clarity. I always say my job is to give certainty and clarity. I sell certainty, all right, and getting clarity on the numbers and being certain on the numbers is absolutely freaking liberating. Just understanding, right? Like, what margin are you, going, and again, we'll get into these, right? What margin are you going in at on a job? What profit margin, and what margin do you need at what volume of work to be able to cover your overheads, your break-even point? And then did you hold that margin on delivery? And can you track the numbers, the cost tracking during delivery of the job, so that if something, gets out of whack, like your labor cost, which is very common, can you do something about it? Or, once you have a handle on the numbers, can you run things more efficiently to improve your profitability on jobs and ultimately your bottom line as well? So, numbers are just so important. But at the end of the day, you're either making a net profit or not.
Yeah. So can you explain to us those key numbers that are 25, 10, 15? Is that correct?
Yes, 25, 10, 15. So we have guys that have those numbers on their wall, right? 25 gross margin. And margin is just the dollar figure converted to a percentage, right? So it's a 25% gross profit margin on the job. And then 10 is 10% overheads to turnover metric, and then 15 is the net profit result. So if anyone's wondering like what percentage, what net profit margin is a good margin, 15% is outstanding. Anywhere between 10 and 15 is what we aim for with our private clients.
Okay. And so you also mentioned 25 as a gross margin.
Yes.
I don't want to get caught in the weeds, but just re-explain the difference between margin and markup, because it's something that comes up really often.
Okay, hold that question. All right. Before we do that, let's just keep it simple. So 25, 10, 15.
Yeah.
All right. So 25 is the gross profit on the job. So that's the profit on the job before you pay your overheads.
Yeah.
Right. And we'll get into that. Overheads as a percentage of turnover is going to be, from my experience, 20 years of doing this, right? It's somewhere between 8 and 12. So 10%'s a good place to land. 12%'s high, man. But if you subtract 10% from 25, what do you get?
About 15.
Exactly. So net profit. So that's where, and we'll get into pricing and why you want to, aim for a certain margin. And this relates to marketing as well. Like your numbers relate to your marketing and your systems and your people and obviously your business development as well. Everything gets impacted by the numbers, which is why we look at it on day one with every single one of our private clients. It's a scoreboard for your business. Mm-hmm. But that's keeping it simple. Those are the yardsticks there, right? So I'd recommend anyone listening, if you want to get a handle, because these numbers can get away from you very quickly. So just trying to keep them clear and having a yardstick and not letting them get confusing or get away from you. Just use those three metrics as a yardstick. But you had a question about markup versus margin, which is one of the biggest bugbears of the industry. Most guys don't understand it. And anyone listening, if you don't understand the difference between markup versus margin, it's not your fault. Like that, no one really explains it and teaches builders well enough. I mean, there's a lot of good information out there nowadays, and obviously it's something that we work on day one again with every one of our private clients. But if you haven't been exposed to any business development or access quality mentors and coaches out there who are specialists in the building industry, then you may not be aware of the fact that when you put 20% on your costs, so to give you an example, say it costs $100,000 to do a job. And in those costs are your materials, so bricks, timber, steel. There's your subcontractors. And very importantly, because a lot of guys don't do this, is costs for your time as the builder. So if you're doing any supervision or project management, two separate things, that time needs to be allocated and costed in ideally at an hourly rate, weekly allocation for each job. So let's say that's done correctly and accurately, and the cost is $100,000. If you want to put a 20% margin on, which is what a lot of guys do. So I've spoken to a lot of builders and I always ask them, so what is the margin that you put on once you've calculated the costs accurately? And a very high percentage say 20%. And then I often ask, so where did you get that number from? They'll go, when I was a young guy starting out, we're in the pub, I spoke to a couple of other builders and that's what they did.
Yeah.
Getting their financial advice for, over a couple of beers in the pub. But if we look at the margin, so that's a mark up because you're marking up from the costings. So costings of $100,000, mark up 20%. So that's $20,000. The quote to the client's $120,000.
Yeah.
So what's the profit margin? Now to calculate that, you've got to work back from the total. So it's 120 grand, and then looking at 20,000 as a percentage of 120,000, it's not 20%, is it?
No.
It's 16.6%. That's the margin.
I was
Another
wondering if you were
way
going to ask me that.
there's a great bookkeeper, Blake, who we work with, you'd know him. And he had a fantastic example, which was, say you bought something for $5, okay? So this glass, you buy it for $5 and then you sell it for $10. All right, the markup is 100%.
Yeah.
Right? The margin that you make is 50%.
Yeah.
So there's the difference between markup and margin. And it's so important for builders to know it. But, hey, on the net profit, I want to point something out as it relates to the number, okay? Like, did we touch on this already, or was it going on air where I spoke about how most guys don't have their wages? So the business owner, I said like most business owners aren't making as much as some of their employees.
Yes.
All right. And they don't cost in a wage for themselves. And it's dependent on whether they're doing any site-related work, because their wage could be, and in most cases, when I start with a builder, part of their wage is cost of sale, because they may be involved in some of the running of the job. Maybe they're doing some supervision or project management. So that needs to, again, be costed in at an hourly rate, weekly allocation. So that's what we call a cost of sale. And then there's a general management wage that they could take, maybe $500 a week as well, which constitutes maybe 20% of their wage. That should be in their fixed expenses.
Yeah.
Either way, they need to be costed in. A lot of guys don't do that. More and more are now, because there's good information out there and guys are becoming more savvy. But if they don't cost themselves in and their business shows a net profit of 4% or 5% and it's $150,000, and by the way, I see this all the time, right? They are spending that $150,000. That's a net profit. That's actually their wage. You know what I mean?
Yes, yeah.
So really, they're lying to themselves, or their bookkeepers. It really shits me, because there's bookkeepers out there that are doing the P&L. They should really be saying to them, hey, you need to look at yourself as an employee of the business and pay yourself accordingly. And then if there's net profit, that's what we measure as the net profit, not your wage as net profit. So that's, and that's where it's interesting, where you get people comparing numbers. Like we get guys in a room and I've had guys tell me, hey, I've got 10% or I have 20% net profit. But when we look at their numbers, they don't. All right. So sadly, a very high percentage of builders don't have accurate numbers, and you need to get it done right. And we'll get into it later, but you don't have to figure it out yourself. Like who, not how is a big thing, right?
Yeah.
Find someone who already knows how to do it. Sorry, I'll let you go.
Yes. Cool. So that's our first number. Okay, net profit margin.
Yes.
There's some key pointers there. The second one I want to get into is break-even point.
Yes.
So most people don't know the break-even point, right? Is that correct?
That's right. I've had people say to me, why should I bother? Like, why do I need to know when I'll break even?
Yeah.
You know, what's the deal?
So why is it important? How do you calculate it? And does it become a decision-making information?
What do you mean by decision making?
Well, like why?
Does it
why
impact decisions?
Yes, exactly.
Yes, of course.
Why do you need it?
Well, you're in business to make profit. We've established that from the first metric, which is your net profit,
Yes.
right? So if you don't know your break-even point, and your break-even point quite simply is the point where the profit you make on your jobs covers your overheads, okay? So there's a volume of work that you do as a builder at a certain gross profit that covers your overheads. So now you're broken even. And ideally, again, you as the business owner need to have your wages in the overheads, okay? So that's it. Now you've broken even and you're not making any net profit. But beyond that point, any dollar that comes in, the gross profit, right? So any volume of work that comes in beyond your break-even point is going to be net profit. All right. So it's important to know where that point is. So what volume of work do you need to do at your gross margin with those overheads to get to a point where you start making net profit? So you've got to, you can't manage what you don't measure. You've got to have a number that you aim for. And again, did I say to you at the beginning, I sell certainty, right? It's clarity and certainty. So getting clear on your break-even point is really important. Yeah. And before I forget, by the way, we've got a break-even calculator on our website. So anyone listening, if you go to builderscoach.com, scroll down to the bottom, there's like links, I think it's resources links, you'll see break-even calculator.
Yeah.
And it's literally a spreadsheet embedded into the website where if you put in your you just feed in the numbers, like your revenue,
numbers, and it will
cost of
come
sales
up.
from your profit and loss, and very importantly, use the 3-month numbers. These are quarterly numbers. You've got to use those, and then it'll extrapolate out to annual figures.
Okay, so just to clarify, can you explain exactly how to calculate the break-even point if you want to do it in a simple way?
Sure. Like the equation itself is quite simple. It's your overheads divided by gross margin percentage. All right. So there's the volume of work that you need to generate as a builder at a certain gross margin, the profit on the jobs to cover the overheads. Now, obviously, your wages as a builder need to be in the overheads. That's the one thing I see that's lacking in most P&Ls. Most guys don't have themselves costed in, either in, cost of sales as supervisor or project manager, or, as a general manager, just that jazz away. So if you've got that in there, then it's that number, the overhead number for the business, ideally over 12 months, divided by the gross margin percentage. And the answer will be the volume of work that they need to generate to cover those expenses.
Okay, awesome. Moving on to the next one.
Yes, let's go.
So number three. I want to talk about job profitability per project. Okay,
right.
How important is that? And then what is the best way or easiest way for a builder to track that job profitability?
Okay, so job reports. So quite simply, it's generating a profit and loss on a job. Okay, and it sounds simple, but it's not. So this is an area where I would highly recommend who, not how. Find someone who knows how to set up job codes and cost codes so that you can track the expenses on a job. And tracking the subcontractor outgoings and then materials are not nearly as complex as the labor. So most builders, and anyone listening will probably relate to this, have overruns with labor, with carpentry, with just labor in general, and then maybe them not costing themselves in. So it's so important to calculate those labor costs at an hourly rate, weekly allocation, and then track them with timesheets. Okay, so the way to do that using best practice processes, and these great systems and tools available today, like using GPS tracking and that sort of thing, is find someone who has already done it for hundreds of other builders like you and get them to set that up for you. So you've got a job code, you've got cost codes, including the labor, using timesheets, track it, and then you'll be able to, at the end of a job, just push a button, get a profit and loss on that job. That's a job report, and you'll see whether you are able to hold the gross profit on that job. Okay. Some guys try and include overheads in their costings. We don't do that. Okay. And it's because of the 25, 10, 15.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. If you're achieving a 25 gross margin, you're covering the 10, you've got 15 left. You don't need to try and allocate overheads. You'll never be able to do it accurately. We'll get into that with pricing. Yeah. But quite simply, job reports tell you the profit you've made on a job, which is really important, right?
Yeah, and you'd be comparing your actual versus the estimated.
Cost versus actuals, absolutely. Yeah. But there's a bigger, more important thing, and 90-odd% of businesses apparently don't do this, right? They don't look at the profit on jobs, all right? So it could be a restaurant, not looking at, okay, what are our most profitable dishes, main courses, entrees, whatever it is. And I've seen that happen with businesses where they don't do it. They just, and the margins differ. For most builders out there listening, if you look back on your last 10, 15, 20, 30 jobs, the margins will be different. The profit you made will be different. So if you just look at that, do the analysis, even if it takes a bit of time and effort, you will be able to identify your most profitable jobs. I got a quick story about a client I worked with when we did that exercise. They were turning over the revenue that our seven-figure club builders do, which is 6 to 7 million. They were doing a $6 million turnover. And they'd never done job reports to see what their most profitable jobs were. We did it, and there was an unbelievable variation. I've had some guys recently where there's not too much of a variation on the profit on jobs, but theirs was ridiculous. It was 10%. I mean, some jobs they did for free. They didn't make any money, but there were others, bigger jobs, that was 38% margin, which is off the chart.
Yeah.
Right. So I pointed out to them that if all your jobs were at a 38%, this is gross margin for a 6 mil turnover, you'd be well and truly not making no money and just breaking even. They're paying their bills and they're paying themselves a wage, but nothing beyond that. That'd be well and truly in the seven-figure club. Yeah. So not having to change the revenue at all, just pursue higher margin jobs. Yeah. And then become a specialist in that type of work to just increase the percentage of that type of work. It's huge. It's so powerful.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay, that's awesome. Now, number 4, I want to talk about cash flow. I think that's a really important thing, but specifically cash flow forecast and revenue projection.
Yes.
So cash flow issues kills more business than we know, right?
Major issue.
Yeah. What's the simplest way for builders to keep their cash flow positive?
The simplest way to, as in when you say keep cash flow positive, money coming in before it goes out.
Correct.
So that's the thing with it. And there is a quick and easy way to do it, and it's using a cash flow positive payment schedule. Now, you've got to make sure it's legal, because in certain states and territories, countries, they're quite strict on how much money or how front-end loaded contracts can be. And you also don't want to have it too front-end loaded where you get lured into a false sense of security. So there's a lot of money in the bank account, but a lot of it's not yours because you've still got invoices to pay.
Yeah.
So that's why it's important to understand what money is yours and what money isn't. But if you've got a consistent gross margin that you go in with and you're able to hold it on delivery and assess that with job reports consistently over time, you can work that out quite quickly. But there is a process called WIP that helps you do that. So it's really important to be able to identify the most profitable jobs and hold it on delivery. Yeah.
And so cash flow forecast and revenue projection, how do we go about it?
Okay. So the positive cash flow payment schedule is a quick and easy fix for cash flow. So anyone who's got a cash flow problem where money's going out before coming in, so they're financing jobs. You cannot finance jobs as a builder, right? You need to, and I've had someone explain it this way. When I say someone, the national lawyer of a national association, they said take the deposit, maximum deposit you can. In some states it's 10%, in others it's 5%. You put that in a separate bank account, and then the progress payment should cash flow the jobs. So we've got a payment schedule example that we use that does exactly that. And I've had a guy I worked with for 3 years. He completely transformed his business, very successful, business running like a well-oiled machine, great operations manual. And at the end of it, he said, the one thing that impacted his business the most was the payment schedule example, which you could implement like that, like really quickly and easily. But he was financing jobs. And I don't have to tell you what it's like. A cash flow pain is a real thing. And it's the reason people chase the revenue, chase the cash flow, because they're often chasing a deposit on a job to bring money in so they can pay the bills on a previous job, right? So you get a break out of that cycle using a cash flow payment schedule. So cash flow forecasts and revenue projections are like a windscreen that you're looking forward through that tell you where things are going. So we've got 2 documents that we use that builders can assess the net cash position and the cash coming in based on the jobs on hand and their payment schedules, right? So they feed the jobs in. It's a very simple template. There's cash in, cash out, and a summary page. So it tells them what's left. Okay, so they know what money is theirs and what money isn't theirs. Now, when we're working with guys, we obviously work on marketing and sales. Sales, by the way, the single most important and powerful process that a builder can put in place in their business for a number of reasons, right? Client selection, job selection, freeing up time, that sort of thing. But that cash flow forecast really helps them see the growth that's coming. If they are going through a growth curve, they can see the money that's coming in the next 12 weeks. Now, that dovetails with the other document you mentioned, it's revenue projection, and that is jobs in the pipeline, quite simply. So how do you get certainty, there's that word again, on the numbers in your pipeline, all right? So if you charge for quotes, which, by the way, a high percentage we have events now where more than half the room is charging for quotes. So that's tipping the scales. We're talking about it for years, like since 2008, and it's finally got to the point now where in the Western world, more builders are charging for quotes than not, which is fantastic, right? But that gives you a level of certainty around conversion rate. So a minimum conversion rate when someone pays you for quotes is about 50%, but as high as 70 or 80%. Now, if you use a preliminary agreement where you get involved in helping people with design, engineering, and you've got a team of pre-construction people that know what they're doing, you can add value there and also then give yourself a higher level of certainty around conversion. So the revenue projection spreadsheet uses conservative metrics, conversion rates through a sales process, which again is the single most powerful tool you can put in place. As a builder, if you don't have a sales process, just having a well-documented sales process is going to be the number one place to start to free up time and money.
Awesome. And so you mentioned those different templates. Can we send it out to our listeners if they contact
Absolutely,
us?
man. Anyone listening, info@builderscoach.com.au. Happy to send you an example of a revenue projection spreadsheet, which again is just jobs in the pipeline that runs parallel with our sales process, and then a cash flow forecast. And our sales process, by the way, is in the resources section
On the
of my
website.
book, $1 Million Builder. You can get a free copy of that there. So just jump in. Like if a lot of guys, it's overwhelming. Like if you have no systems and processes and want to get it fixed, where do you start? Sales process is a really, really good place to start. But
So guys, just to recap, there's a lot of free resources on the website. So builderscoach.com, sorry. But if you're looking for anything specific or you don't know where to look, just send us an email at info@builderscoach.com.au. Okay, last but not least.
okay,
Do you know which one I'm going to talk about?
pricing.
Oh, well, I was going to go into fixed expenses.
Oh, okay, fixed
Yes.
expenses. Yeah.
Yes. So many builders only focus on job costs, but completely ignore their fixed expenses. So why is tracking that so important?
We touched on the importance of the business owner having their wage in there if it's relevant. If they're not working on site, they need to be paying themselves a wage as the general manager.
Yeah.
All right. But it comes back to 25, 10, 15. You've got overheads. You've got to know what your overheads are. And remember, that's the number that you need for your break-even equation. It's your overheads divided by your gross margin percentage. This is why the 25, 10, 15, those numbers are so important. And everything is geared towards, moving the needle on those metrics to get builders a result. So it's keeping it simple, but once you unpack it, there's some complexity there. So overheads for a fair percentage, I'd say half of the builders that I start working with, the overheads are not accurate. So they don't have them costed in. And then the other major issue we see is they have their cost of sales, like supervision, labor costs, supervision, project management, and just general labor in their overheads. And those are not overheads, they're cost of sales. And then, I spoke to a guy the other day whose bookkeeper was keeping the supervision and carpentry and site-related wages in the overheads and then moving them up into cost of sales later when they wanted to review their job report. It was just confusion, right?
Yeah.
Structure your cost codes correctly, separate cost of sales from overheads, then you'll be able to see where you sit with your margins, your gross margin, your net margin, and then your overheads to turnover percentage or percentages relative to 25, 10, 15. And then you can see, like maybe, if your number's at 6% overheads, you can afford to spend more on overheads, which includes marketing, for example, or putting a new job scheduling tool in place, or getting that best practice bookkeeper in, someone like Blake, to help set up your job codes and cost codes. So you got better accuracy, certainty, and headspace, man. Getting the numbers sorted out. I'm not here to say it's easy, but getting it done well so that you know what, every dollar that comes in and out of the business is liberating. Yeah. Especially from a headspace perspective.
Yeah. And so overheads, ideally 10%, but anywhere between 8 to 12. It seems
8 to
like
12,
a
often
good
less
number.
than 8, 6%. And then, So,
Awesome.
but 10% is like the sweet spot.
Yes.
We're just using general numbers here.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, of course, yes. Okay, awesome. So those are 5 top key metric numbers that every builder needs to know. Recap, we've got net profit margin. We've got a break-even point.
Yep.
I'm going to do it by heart. And then we have job profitability, so per project, the cash flow projection, cash flow forecast and revenue projection.
Yep.
And then last but not least, the fixed expenses and overheads.
Nailed it.
Awesome. Anything else you want to add to that?
No, the only thing I'd say to anyone listening is don't be afraid to get the numbers sorted out. You don't need to understand the numbers yourself. Find someone who does.
Yeah.
Who, not how. It's not how do I understand everything. It's who already does, and where are they? How can I engage them? So if anyone has any questions or they want us to point them to someone in their area, info@builderscoach.com.au. builderscoach.com.au. Otherwise, go to the builderscoach.com website. Happy to help.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Guys, we'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you, Jess. Cheers, guys. Take care.